shocking and raw that once you start listening you will not be able to turn away, so I want you to stay with me till the very end, because every twist, every detail, every moment will pull you deeper into a chain of events that will change the way you see justice forever. Now, before we dive in, make sure you hit that like button, share this video with others and subscribe, so you never miss stories like this one, because what happened on that quiet evening in a small American town was nothing short of unbelievable. Picture this: it is a humid summer night in a southern state, the kind of night where the air feels heavy and you can hear crickets buzzing from every corner. The streets are dimly lit, only a few cars pass by, the convenience stores are closing and families are inside cooling off under ceiling fans. But then, out of nowhere, a police cruiser pulls into a neighborhood that has already grown used to seeing flashing blue and red lights far too often. The officer inside, his name is Sergeant Bradley Kane. He is a man feared by some, respected by others, but whispered about by many because his reputation is tainted by accusations of excessive force, racial profiling, and an almost disturbing pride in his police dog. A powerful German shepherd named Thor. Kane had a history of letting Thor loose during arrests, especially against black suspects, and most of those incidents never made the news. But tonight everything would be different, because tonight he crossed a line that would spark a chain of events no one saw coming. A woman named Angela Moore, 32 years old, single mother of one, hard-working nurse assistant, was walking home from her evening shift. She wore her scrubs, still slightly wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. She was exhausted but proud of herself because she had managed to provide for her daughter despite all the obstacles life had thrown her way. Angela was a kind soul, soft-spoken but strong-willed, and in that small town many people knew her for always standing up for what was right. Her only crime that night was walking home in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. When Kane's cruiser slowed beside her, Angela felt uneasy. She pulled her bag closer to her chest and quickened her steps. She had heard stories about Kane. She had seen him rough up young men in the neighborhood. She had heard about Thor and the screams of people bitten, but she never thought she would be the next target. The cruiser stopped. Kane rolled down his window and barked out a command. "Hey, what are you doing out here this late?" Angela paused, trying to stay calm. "Just walking home from work, officer. I live 2 blocks away." But her calm tone didn't soften his suspicion or his bias. Instead, Kane smirked and opened his door, stepping out with a swagger that screamed intimidation. Thor growled from the back seat. Angela's heart began to race, but she kept her composure. She didn't want trouble, she didn't want confrontation, but trouble had already found her. Kane demanded ID. She explained it was in her bag. He grew impatient, accusing her of hiding something. The air grew tenser with every passing second, until in a moment that would forever change everything, Kane yanked open the back door of his cruiser and with a simple hand gesture released Thor onto Angela. The German shepherd lunged at her, growling, snarling, snapping its jaws. Angela screamed, dropping her bag as the dog clamped onto her arm. The pain was immediate, sharp, tearing into her flesh. She cried out, begging Kane to call the dog off, but instead he stood there smirking, arms crossed, watching as if this were a show. Her blood stained her scrubs as she struggled desperately, trying to push the animal away. Her cries echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Lights flicked on in nearby homes. People peeked through blinds, but no one dared intervene, not yet. Angela stumbled back, adrenaline pumping. She tried to fight the dog off, but Thor was relentless. Kane finally shouted orders not to stop the attack, but to command her to get on the ground. His voice was cold, threatening, filled with the arrogance of someone who believed he could get away with anything. "Get on the ground now, or it gets worse," Angela gasped through tears. "I didn't do anything, please call him off, please." But Kane didn't move. In that split second, something inside Angela snapped. Years of frustration, fear, and survival instincts took over. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting to make it back home to her daughter. The pain, the humiliation, the terror all boiled into one desperate decision, and in that moment she reached into her bag, not for her ID but for something else, something she had legally owned for years for protection. A small handgun she kept safely tucked in a side pouch. With trembling, blood-soaked hands she pulled it out, raised it, and fired. The sound of the gunshot shattered the night. The dog yelped, falling back, releasing her arm. Kane's smirk vanished, his eyes widened in shock as he reached for his own weapon, but Angela was already shaking, tears streaming, her chest heaving from panic. The world seemed to spin in slow motion. What had just happened? Had Angela just saved her life, or had she just destroyed it? Neighbors opened their doors, now stepping outside with phones in hand, recording the chaos. Voices shouted, some screamed, some cheered, others cried out in disbelief. The tension in the air was electric, and in that instant everyone knew nothing would ever be the same again. Angela stood frozen, gun in hand, blood dripping from her arm. Kane raised his weapon, barking at her to drop it, but she knew if she dropped it she might not live another second. Sirens in the distance grew louder. Backup was coming fast. She had seconds, maybe less, to decide her fate, and this is only the beginning, because what happened next turned a horrifying attack into a national scandal. Stay with me. Don't click away, because you need to hear every chilling detail of how this night spiraled into one of the most shocking true stories you will ever hear. And as we go deeper into this story, I promise you will not want to miss a second, so hit like, share this, and subscribe, because the twists are only just beginning. Angela's hands trembled as she pointed the gun. Her breaths came in short rapid bursts, her ears still ringing from the gunshot. The German Shepherd whined in pain, scrambling back toward the cruiser, its body jerking as it tried to retreat. Kane's face twisted from shock into pure rage. His hand moved toward his holster, but his mind seemed to hesitate for a brief moment. This was not the outcome he expected. He had unleashed his K9 to intimidate a woman he thought was powerless, yet here she stood, bloody, terrified, but armed, and suddenly he wasn't in control anymore. Neighbors gathered, some shouting, "Record this, record everything," others pulling out their phones, pointing their cameras at the flashing lights and unfolding chaos. Angela's voice cracked with desperation. "Please don't make me do this. I didn't want this. I was just going home." But Kane didn't hear or didn't care. His pride had been pierced in front of witnesses. He barked, "Drop the weapon now. Get on the ground," his voice booming over the night. But Angela's instincts screamed that if she obeyed she would never make it home alive. Backup sirens wailed closer and closer, each passing second the neighborhood becoming a stage for a deadly showdown between fear and authority. The seconds stretched like hours, adrenaline surging through her veins, her grip on the pistol tightening. Kane's eyes locked on hers. Two lives, two realities clashing in one moment. Then screeching tires, two more cruisers pulled in, lights bouncing off houses, blinding Angela as doors flew open and officers spilled out, weapons drawn, shouting conflicting commands. "Drop the gun, put your hands up, get on the ground." It was chaos, their voices overlapping, their bodies moving into positions, guns aimed directly at her. Angela's vision blurred with tears, her blood soaking through her sleeve, dripping onto the cracked pavement. She shook her head, crying out, "I didn't do anything. He set his dog on me. I was just trying to live." But no one lowered their weapon. The neighborhood was awake now, people on porches screaming at the cops, some yelling, "Let her live," others begging Angela to drop the gun. The scene spiraled into a storm of fear, distrust, and deadly possibilities. Kane barked at his fellow officers, "She shot my dog. She pulled a gun on me. Take her down." He framed the narrative before Angela could even speak, and with his words the tone shifted, more hostile, more threatening. Angela's heart thundered in her chest as she realized her voice might be drowned out, her truth buried before anyone ever heard it. The dog whimpered from the cruiser, its cries adding to the night's eerie tension. Her arm throbbed with unbearable pain. She was losing blood, her strength waning, yet something inside her refused to let go. She thought of her daughter waiting at home, maybe still awake, maybe already asleep, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. Angela couldn't die here, not like this, not without her little girl. Knowing she fought to come back to her, she screamed louder than she ever had before. "He let that dog attack me. He wanted me dead. I had no choice." And for a moment there was silence, just her raw voice cracking through the night. One of the younger officers hesitated, his weapon lowering slightly, his eyes flickering with doubt, but Kane snapped at him, "Don't listen. She's lying. She's dangerous." His voice laced with venom, twisting the scene in his favor. The crowd grew louder, chanting, "Let her go, let her go," voices overlapping with police commands. It was pandemonium waiting to explode. Then in a split-second decision, Angela raised her gun, not to fire but to lift it high above her head, pointing toward the night sky. She screamed, "I'm not your enemy. I just want to live." But before she could even lower it, a shot rang out, not hers but from one of the officers. Her body jolted as the bullet grazed her side, sending her spinning. She collapsed to her knees, clutching her wound, her pistol clattering onto the pavement. The crowd erupted in screams, some recording every second, others running back inside. Terrified, Angela gasped for air, her vision darkening, her body weak, but she forced her head up to see Kane smirking again as he holstered his weapon. His plan had worked. She was on the ground, bleeding, disarmed. Humiliated officers rushed forward, pinning her down, roughly cuffing her wrists. Despite her cries of pain, her blood smeared the asphalt as she begged, "Please, I need help, I'm hurt." But no one listened. Instead they dragged her toward a cruiser as Kane shouted, "Charges: possession of a firearm, attempted assault on an officer, animal cruelty, resisting arrest." His words spilled like poison, framing her as a monster, while the truth of what happened bled out onto the street. Neighbors shouted in protest, some screaming lies, others crying in shock. One woman yelled, "I saw it all. He set that dog on her. She didn't do nothing." But the officers ignored her, their focus locked only on controlling the narrative. Angela's daughter's face flashed before her eyes. She whispered her name through tears, "Jasmine, Jasmine, I'm so sorry," as she was shoved into the back of a cruiser, the door slamming shut, trapping her in silence. The crowd's shouts, muffled by glass, sirens wailed again as an ambulance finally arrived, not for Angela but for the injured dog. Paramedics rushing to treat Thor as he whimpered in Kane's arms. Angela's jaw clenched, rage swelling inside her. Even through the pain, they were saving the dog while she bled, ignored. In the back of a police car the message was clear. Her life was worth less than an animal's to them. But Angela was not done. This was only the beginning, because what happened next would spark outrage, protests, and a courtroom battle that would reveal the darkest truths of Sergeant Bradley Kane's past and force the entire nation to choose a side. Stay with me, watch this till the end, because every twist that comes next will leave you speechless. And before we continue, remember to hit like, share this story, and subscribe, because this is far from over. And you will not want to miss what comes next. Angela sat slumped in the back seat, her vision fading in and out as the cruiser pulled away. The officer driving didn't speak. The radio crackled with updates, dispatch voices calm, detached, as if her bleeding body was just another statistic. The station loomed ahead, fluorescent lights casting an eerie glow over the parking lot. They dragged her inside, her legs barely able to carry her. She begged again for medical help but was met with silence and mocking laughter. Kane barked at the booking officer, "Don't waste resources on her, she's fine, just a scratch." Angela's blood dripped onto the floor, her body trembling with shock. The nurse on call, a tired older woman, frowned seeing her condition, but the commanding officer's glare silenced her attempt to intervene. Paperwork mattered more than a human life. Mugshots were taken, fingerprints pressed onto cold paper, her injured arm barely able to move yet. They forced it until she screamed. Angela's mind swirled with confusion, fear and fury. Her life was unraveling in a matter of hours. She had gone from walking home to being painted as a violent criminal, but deep inside a fire was igniting. She wasn't going to be another forgotten name. She was going to fight back because she knew the truth was on her side, and the truth always finds a way to surface no matter how much those in power try to bury it. And so began a fight that would stretch beyond that night, beyond that small town, beyond Kane's twisted control. It would become a fight for justice that would reach national headlines and force people everywhere to ask the question, what really happened that night with the racist cop, the K-9, and the woman who refused to die quietly? Angela sat in a holding cell, her scrubs soaked in blood dried stiff against her skin, her arm throbbing with every shallow breath. The fluorescent light above flickered, buzzing loudly, the sound drilling into her skull. She had never been arrested in her life, never thought she would see the inside of a jail cell, yet here she was treated like a criminal when all she had done was try to survive. Her body shook with rage and fear, but her mind replayed one thought over and over: Jasmine, her little girl. She imagined Jasmine waking up to an empty apartment, the stuffed bear still in her arms, wondering why Mama hadn't come home. Panic twisting Angela's heart tighter than the handcuffs that had cut into her wrists earlier. Across town, news was already spreading, social media filled with shaky cell phone videos neighbors had posted within minutes. The hashtags were already climbing trending pages, words like "Justice for Angela" and "Stop that 9" cop" spreading like wildfire. The footage was raw, Angela's screams piercing through screens, the image of the dog tearing at her arm, the gunshot, the swarm of officers, weapons drawn. Then the moment paramedics rushed to save the dog while she was ignored. The contrast was too much to ignore, and the public reaction was explosive. Protests began the very next day, small at first, a handful of people standing outside the station with signs chanting "Let her go, demand justice for Angela," but within hours it grew. Dozens turned into hundreds, cars lined the streets, horns blaring, voices united against the injustice. Mothers, fathers, young people, old people, all chanting her name, all demanding accountability. But inside the station, Kane smirked, watching from the window. He had been through this before: complaints, investigations, whispers of misconduct, but none of it ever stuck. He had connections in high places, a department that shielded him, a union that protected him. He was confident this time would be no different, but he underestimated the power of one truth caught on camera, one truth shared millions of times across the nation. Angela's case became a headline on major news outlets, anchors replaying the footage, debating the circumstances, experts weighing in, some defending the officer, others demanding reform. The country split once again over a question that cut deep into its soul: was this justice, or was this another example of abuse of power? Angela's lawyer, a young fierce attorney named Marcus Reed, stepped forward. He had seen the footage, he had heard Angela's cries, and he knew this case was bigger than one woman. It was about a system designed to silence voices like hers. He demanded her release on bail, citing her urgent need for medical treatment. The judge hesitated. The prosecution pushed back, painting her as dangerous, violent, but the outcry outside the courthouse grew too loud to ignore. Finally, bail was granted and Angela walked out, supported by protesters, her arm wrapped in bandages, her face pale but determined. The crowd erupted, chanting her name, lifting signs high in the air. Angela raised her good arm, tears streaking down her cheeks. She whispered, "Thank you," her voice breaking as she realized she was no longer alone. This was bigger than her now. This was a movement. Kane watched from his home, seething with anger, his dog recovering on the couch, stitches in its side. He scrolled through his phone, reading the comments, calling him a monster. His pride bruised, his power questioned, and inside his rage grew darker. He vowed he would not let her destroy his career, his reputation, his empire of fear. In the days that followed, protests swelled across the city. National reporters arrived, cameras capturing every chant, every confrontation. Angela sat for interviews, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each retelling. She described the terror, the pain, the injustice. She spoke of her daughter and the fear that she would never see her again. She spoke of the humiliation of being treated like her life didn't matter and the world listened. Her story resonated with millions because it wasn't just her story, it was the story of countless others, silenced, unseen, ignored, and this time the silence was broken. Kane tried to spin the narrative, his lawyer releasing statements about officer safety, about threats, about her alleged aggression, but the footage spoke louder than words, every frame dismantling his lies, every second exposing his cruelty. The trial was set, the Nation watching closely. The courtroom became a stage, cameras lining the back walls, reporters scribbling notes. Angela sat at the defense table, her lawyer by her side, her arms still scarred but healing, her spirit burning brighter than ever. Kane sat at the prosecution table, his uniform crisp, his face stone cold but his eyes burning with hatred. The judge entered, the jury selected, the opening statements began. The prosecution painted Angela as reckless, a woman who escalated a routine encounter into violence. They spoke of her firearm, of the danger she posed. They displayed images of the injured K9, evoking sympathy. But then it was Marcus Reed's turn. He stood tall, his voice steady as he played the footage for the jury. Angela's screams filled the courtroom, the sight of Thor lunging, the smirk on Kane's face, the chaos that followed. Every juror's eyes widened. The truth undeniable. Marcus spoke with passion. This is not a case of a woman attacking an officer. This is a case of a woman attacked by a system meant to protect her. This is a case of survival of a mother fighting to make it home to her child. And as the evidence piled up, the cracks in Kane's armor began to show. Witnesses testified, neighbors who saw everything brave enough now to speak out. One after another they told the same story. Kane released the dog unprovoked. Angela begged for mercy. She only fired when she had no choice. The jury listened, the nation listened, and Kane's carefully crafted image began to crumble. But Kane was not ready to fall. He took the stand, his voice calm, rehearsed. He painted himself as the victim, a loyal officer betrayed by a violent woman, his dog a loyal partner shot in the line of duty. But under cross-examination Marcus tore through his facade, pulling out records of past complaints, testimonies from other victims, reports buried by the department. One by one the skeletons spilled from his closet until his credibility lay in ruins. The courtroom buzzed, whispers echoing as jurors exchanged uneasy glances, Kane's mask slipping under the weight of truth. Angela sat silently, tears in her eyes as she watched justice inch closer. But the road was far from over. The trial stretched on. Witnesses, cross-examinations, heated debates outside the courthouse. Protests continued, sometimes clashing with counter-protesters. The nation's eyes locked on every development, and Angela's name became a symbol of resistance, of survival, of truth refusing to be buried. This was no longer just about one night. This was about history, about justice, about a voice that could not be silenced. So stay with me, because what comes next is the turning point, the climax that will decide whether Angela walks free or becomes another casualty of a broken system. And I promise you, you will not want to miss what happens next. So like this video, share it with others, and subscribe, because the ending will leave you speechless and maybe even change the way you see the world forever. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker as the trial neared its end, the air thick with tension, every eye locked on the judge, every breath caught in the throats of the jury. Angela sat still, her hands folded tightly in front of her, her knuckles white, her heart hammering against her chest. Her daughter sat in the gallery clutching the stuffed bear her grandmother had brought, whispering prayers under her breath. The entire town, it seemed, was packed into the wooden benches while cameras captured every flicker of emotion for the world outside. Sergeant Kane sat tall, trying to project confidence, but beads of sweat rolled down his temples, his eyes darting occasionally toward the jury, his jaw clenched tight as if his entire future depended on one last illusion. Marcus Reed, Angela's attorney, stood for closing arguments, his voice strong, steady, piercing the silence. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you witnessed here is not just about Angela Moore. This is about the abuse of power, about a system that has for too long protected those who use authority as a weapon. This is about survival, about a woman forced into an impossible decision because a man with a badge chose to unleash terror instead of protection. Marcus paused, letting the weight of his words settle. He gestured toward Angela, her bandaged arm, her scarred face, her trembling yet defiant posture. She is not a criminal, she is not a danger, she is a mother, a provider, a woman who wanted nothing more than to make it home that night to her child. He turned his gaze back to the jury, his eyes unwavering. The footage does not lie, the witnesses do not lie, but Sergeant Kane did, and if you let his lies stand today, then justice means nothing. His words echoed. The jury sat in heavy silence. The judge gave final instructions, and then it was time. The jurors filed out, retreating to deliberate. Hours passed. Angela sat in the waiting room, her breaths shallow, her fingers tracing the scar on her arm. Kane sat across the hall, his lawyer whispering reassurances, though his eyes betrayed fear. Outside the courthouse the crowd swelled, chanting louder than ever, signs raised, fists in the air. Justice for Angela, no more K9 terror. Families with children, elderly men and women, students, workers, all united, voices blending into one demand for truth. At last the doors opened, the jury filed back, and everyone rose, the silence deafening as the foreman handed the envelope to the judge. Angela's eyes burned with tears. She whispered a silent prayer. Gripping the necklace around her neck, the judge cleared his throat, the courtroom leaning forward as one. The jury finds the defendant Angela Moore not guilty on all counts. The words exploded through the air, gasps, cheers, sobs. Angela's body collapsed forward, her hands covering her face. Jasmine leapt into her grandmother's arms, screaming, "Mama, Mama, she's free!" The crowd outside erupted, horns honking, chants rising higher, voices echoing down every street. Angela hugged her daughter, holding her so tight She could hardly breathe, the tears streaming down both their faces. Kane sat frozen, his face pale, his career, his power shattered in an instant. But it was not over, because Marcus stood again. Your Honor, in light of the evidence, we also demand that Sergeant Bradley Kane face investigation for misconduct, excessive force and perjury. The courtroom roared with approval. The judge banged his gavel. Order, but the momentum was unstoppable. News broke within minutes, the headlines flashing across every screen. Angela Moore acquitted, racist cop under investigation. Protests turned to celebrations, cheers filling the streets, people hugging strangers, fireworks lighting the night sky. But for Angela it was not just victory, it was vindication, it was survival, it was the knowledge that she had not been silenced. She had fought back and lived to tell her story, yet even as she stood free, scars etched into her skin and soul, she knew the fight was bigger than her. She looked into the cameras, tears glistening on her cheeks, her daughter's small hand wrapped around hers, and she spoke softly but firmly. I didn't win tonight, we all did. This is for everyone who was silenced, this is for everyone who was told their life didn't matter. I'm standing here because of you, because you refused to stay quiet, and we cannot stop now. Angela's words rippled through the crowd, through television screens, through social media feeds, sparking conversation, sparking hope, sparking fire. Kane's downfall began swiftly, stripped of his badge, suspended without pay, facing charges of misconduct, the department under federal investigation, his once iron grip crumbling to dust. He tried to cling to lies, to paint himself a victim, but the truth had already spread too far. The people had seen, and they would not forget. Angela returned home, finally walking through the door where Jasmine ran into her arms, burying her face in her chest, sobbing, "Mama, you came back." And Angela whispered through tears, "I promised I would always come back to you." Their apartment, small but filled with warmth, became a sanctuary, a place where survival turned into strength, where fear turned into resolve. Angela began to speak at rallies, at community meetings, her voice steady, her scars visible, her story undeniable. She became not just a survivor but a symbol, a leader, a light in the darkness, and the nation listened. Policies began to shift, conversations grew louder, reforms demanded with new urgency. The story of Angela Moore became more than headlines, it became a movement, and as the sun set on that chapter, a new dawn broke, filled with possibility, filled with courage, filled with the unshakable truth that justice, though delayed, could not be denied. So stay with me, because this story is not just Angela's story, it's a story for every person who has ever felt powerless, every person who has ever been silenced, every person who has ever been told they don't matter. Angela proved them wrong. She proved that survival is power, truth is power, and no badge, no dog, no lie can erase that. And now I want you to take this story with you, share it, let others hear it, let others feel it, let others be changed by it, because the fight for justice continues. And your voice matters more than you know. So if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel, then do one thing for me: watch till the end, which you just did. Like this video, share it with everyone you know, and subscribe so you never miss stories like this, ones that need to be told, stories that shine a light where others want darkness to remain, because together we can make sure Angela's voice and the voices of so many others are never silenced again. This is not the end, this is just the beginning.